Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us as we celebrate Women's History Month 2021. I've got Dr. Brandi Leonard with us, a professor of English, and we've probably had her in literature courses, and Miss Angela Martin, who you probably had in a history class. Today we're going to talk about some women that you don't know but you should know. We've worked on this all week, and we think we've got some very interesting characters that we want to share with you. So we'll go ahead and get started. And let's see,
All right.
Dr. Leonard.
Okay. So I'll start with Zora Neale Hurston. So a little bit about her. She was born January 7th, 1881, and she was a major contributor to the new African American literary aesthetic, or what we know as the Harlem Renaissance. And so that was a time of rebirth and creativity in the African American community in the United States, distinctly taking place geographically in Harlem. And so, a little bit about Zora. She published four novels, two folklore anthologies, a host of short stories, essays, and poems. But her greatest work she's known for is Their Eyes Were Watching God, which was published in 1937. In the text, she has a feminine uh, main character in Janie, her main character, who starts out the novel as a young girl and then goes throughout the novel and goes through three different marriages. One as a young girl, one as a 40 something woman, and then later, not too long after her second marriage, she gets married to a man who's significantly younger than her. And so I want to show a clip that comes from Their Eyes Were Watching God. In this clip, we see um, Halle Berry featured as Hurston's main character, Janie, who at this point in the novel has been married to Jody Starks for about 20 years. And Jody has been the mayor of Eatonville. And as the mayor, he's an important man who basically has kept his wife suppressed because he wants to set her off and set her off as apart from the townspeople, apart from all the common folks. But that suppression comes with a heavy price to Janie because she cannot be her authentic, genuine self. So, to put the clip in perspective, Janie is saying her last words to Joe as he is about to die. And we can see what kind of marriage that Janie has with Joe. We can see that she is greatly oppressed. And I think you'll see that clearly when you watch the clip. So, if we can have the clip.
Did that work?
Yes. Well, you got to push it one more time. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
Doctor said that I'm dying. I guess you come to watch.
Jody, maybe I ain't been such a good wife to you. But you gave me everything a woman could ever dream of having. And I thank you. But Jody, you and me done been together now for 20 years. You don't know me half at all.
I know you.
Change from that, Jody. Running down the road. I wanted to keep a house with you in a wonderful way, but you wasn't really satisfied with me the way I was.
I built a whole town for us. That ain't good enough for you.
It was just that my own feeling had to be squeezed and crowded out of me to make room for yours in me.
Claim everything on me. I don't let you show me no feeling. Huh? Janie, that's all I ever wanted.
Ain't nobody trying to blame nothing on you, Joe. But all this bowing down and obedience, well, it just ain't what I run off down that road with you for.
Shut up.
Even now, you got to die with me being obedient instead of letting me love you.
I hope that thunder and lightning kill you. Get out of here. Get out!
Sit in that rolling chair. It's hard for you too. Whatever folks thought of Joe while he was living, they turned out for his funeral and cried over him. 'Cause whether they liked him or not, they knew he had been a good man and that his passing was a great loss. I felt the sadness too, but alongside the sadness, I was feeling something else. I was feeling free. There's a new day coming, everything gonna be turning over. Everything gonna be turning over. Where you gonna be standing when it comes? There's a new day coming, everything gonna be turning over. Everything gonna be turning over. Where you gonna be standing when it comes?
Okay. So in the clip, we see Janie uncovering her hair, and one of the things that that Zora brings out in the story is the suppression of Janie's natural and physical beauty. One of the reasons Joe has her cover her hair is that one day he sees one of the townsmen fondling or playing with Janie's hair when she's not looking, and that sends him into overdrive. And he tells her that she has to cover up, so not only is he keeping her under lock and key, he won't let her out to have fun on the porch with the townspeople and play checkers and listen to gossip. She's to stay in the house, and she has to cover her hair, which is pretty devastating for a young woman. We know that Janie was married to Jody in her early 20s and all the way up to 40. And so this is a time of life where she wants to be free and wants to be beautiful, but she can't because her husband is suppressing that in her. And so as Jody dies, she's able to be free and to be her authentic self. And to me, that is, very relative or related to the ongoing struggle that women have today. While we struggle with society's definition on feminine beauty and what we should look like, or you know um, our skin color, our weight, our age even becomes an issue in terms of how women define themselves or how society defines women for them. And so and I'll just open up for the discussion here. you know what is Why is it that we can't move past I think we are moving past some of these blockages to women being able to define themselves by themselves, but it doesn't seem like it's happening quick enough. We're still struggling with women having negative body images of themselves. or feeling like, they're not worthy because they don't look a certain way.
Uh,
So, yeah.
yeah. Well, I think, she really hit the nail on the head, I think, with this one, like many of these that we'll discuss today. But I think it's just a continuation of this. She's created this character who this has probably happened to, we don't know how many times.
Mhm.
But even as we get past her period and we get closer to us,
Mhm.
it's not, it's, you know, the commercialization of everything just takes over.
Mhm.
Um, and we are bombarded constantly about what we are supposed to be like, what we're supposed to look like, how we're supposed to think, what we're supposed to do. And it ultimately goes back to and becomes the negativity in our heads and even in our souls almost for some women. I
Mhm.
mean, just this morning I was scrolling quickly through Facebook to catch up a couple of things since I've ignored it a lot. And one of my really dearest friends from graduate school, she again another long affirmation of you are enough, you are wonderful, you are, and so we're not past it. It's good to see those because you'd almost never used to see those 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so there is improvement, it's just not fast enough.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
agree. I think that we have to, as women, we have to be a little bit more supportive of each other, and
Absolutely.
not really just, oh, well, this is what, Hollywood says is socially acceptable, or this is what you're supposed to look like, because not everybody can fit in the same box. And so I think it's just important that we really um, motivate and empower other women, because you're stronger in numbers. So that's really, always just be kind, like, regardless. I think it's a hard thing to, you know, let's have a conversation and let's band together, and, because women are adequate. And being a coach, that was one of my biggest selling points, is that you're enough, you're capable of doing what you set your mind to. And I think we need a little bit more of that in this world.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think Hurston definitely hit on a topic that was, maybe just beginning in conversations when she published in 1937. I don't know. And Miss Martin, you can come in with the historical aspect here that women, I guess, we started to see some with the suffrage movement coming to fruition as women gained the right to vote, as women were asserting themselves more, coming from the roaring 20s, where women started to wear their hair shorter and wear, shorter dresses, and they smoked in public. All these things
Oh, horrors.
that, there was all these no-nos. And so we start to see women start to assert themselves a little bit more. But certainly at the time that Hurston wrote the novel, you know, women didn't have the freedoms that we now have today. And
Absolutely.
so, but ironically, we're still having these same conversations. Even though we're more free, we're still talking about negative body image. We're still talking about abusive relationships. We're still talking about women being put in inferiority roles or being seen as less than. And so, not only was she prophetic, but I mean, in bringing up this character and the issues that come along with that, that she was, it was groundbreaking, her novel at the time, because really
It
nobody was
was.
having
And
those conversations. Hmm.
interestingly, I know we don't want to go on and on and on, but interestingly, it's right as the Victorian era ends when fashions begin to change and then ideas begin to change and women start to assert themselves more. So 1890s, there's not much going on with much change there, but you start even seeing it in newspapers and magazines after that, where there is eventually this very first attempt at, well, maybe you're too fat, here's this new machine that will help you be unfat. And then I've even seen very odd advertisements, like at the very back of these, well, you're too thin, so you need, here's what we're going to do for that. And in the 1950s, honest to goodness, one of the most seen advertisement was for bad breath. I mean, you know, you have halitosis, oh my gosh, So I mean, I think Hurston really pushed this kind of out there
Mhm.
at a very opportune moment. And I think we're still trying to kind of get there. I don't personally know of another author or writer in anywhere around this period that does much the same thing, at least in the United States.
Right. Yes. Yes, I agree.
Going to move on to the next slide.
Okay, and I'll introduce her. I know Dr. Leonard knows a good bit more about her than I do. This is Anna Julia Cooper. She was born in 1858 and passed away in 1964. She is a renowned scholar, uh, definitely a feminist, one of our earliest for the 19th and 20th centuries. She was really a beacon for racial progress. She really wanted us to figure this thing out and move forward. Her very first published work was called A Voice from the South. It was also, many have called it her manifesto in 1892. And one of the things I just absolutely love about this is there is a quote from that work that the U.S. passport actually has on it, all the paperwork and all that. But our passport today has this quote from her. "The cause of freedom is not the cause of race or a sect, a party or a class. It is the cause of humankind, the very birthright of humanity." She truly wanted us to move on. She wanted us to look beyond the color of our skin or our hair or our whatever and really get to the fact that we're all humans.
Mhm. Mhm.
Dr. Leonard, do you want to comment on that?
I really don't have much to say about
I
about
took
her,
it
but
all. I'm sorry.
I do think that, yeah, again, talking about these early conversations and why it's so important to know about these women that you don't know about, because we know about these later conversations. We know about, the heroines that came along in the 70s and the 80s and maybe even the 60s because of the civil rights movement. We don't know about these early 20th century people who really were up against the gun a whole lot more because of, the lynchings and the very blatant segregation that was going on. And that's where Anna Julia Cooper fits. And so unfortunately we don't celebrate these women as much because we don't know about them. um, and I'm glad we're having this conversation because it brings a rebirth, or it brings renewed interest in what's the origin, what's the genesis of these conversations about not only race, but as Miss Martin talked about, transcending race and talking about how we can all come together and how we can all have these conversations so that we can hash out our differences, which is so important. I think um, that Julia Cooper had a start or had a hand in beginning those conversations that we, so desperately still need today.
I agree. Definitely think that um, looking past all of the details of what a person looks like and how does that person treat me? How does that person, that's kind of, I think that to me, the idea of looking at someone's outward appearance is to me almost just so narrow-minded that it's just, to me, it's illogical. I think that we're all human, and I think it's important that we just get back to that and say, hey, look, you're human, you got your problems, I've got my problems, we're going to get together, we're going to get through this together.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to have those conversations. So I'm definitely thankful in doing this research and these ladies that we've been discussing. I've learned a lot. Just looking up and just looking for pictures, honestly, for the slide. I mean, you see, well, this is where this really started.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, we'll go.
And then one of my very favorites. There was a point in time in my life when I was a little bit of an environmentalist, and honest to God, no, very few people know. At one point, I actually was a member of Greenpeace. Yeah, a little bit of a little bit of that going on, and I had heard of Rachel Carson, but it wasn't until I was in graduate school that I actually had this this wonderful course that kind of looked at some of environmental history, but also, how we handle logging and all the forestry and all of that. That I actually read her book that she's most famous for, Silent Spring. So this is Rachel Carson. She was born in 1907 and unfortunately passed away far too soon in 1964. She was a marine. She was a marine biologist. She was brilliant. She ended up going off to a women's college when she first went because that's what you did back then. They were not integrated yet. She ended up in biology. That was not where she was headed originally. And she won all kinds of crazy scholarships and awards because she was so brilliant. She very slowly worked her way up what eventually became the Fish and Wildlife Services for the federal government. She, conversed with a wide array of many biologists. And in the late 1950s, she started getting reports from some other fellow women biologists, but also some men. But the biggest number of them were from women biologists who were a bit concerned. She was living on the shore of Maryland, kind of doing her marine biology, and she had noticed that there were some issues. There would be big kills. There was a big fish kill in the Mississippi River, I think in the 50s or early 60s. And everybody's like, well, what happened? What is going on with here? And she started then deeply researching synthetic pesticides. And literally the fish kill in the Mississippi was because of those pesticides. And her book, Silent Spring, is this discussion about the birds dying off because of the use of the pesticide DDT. And she worked to try to really get rid of it, to ban DDT outright. And the petrochemical companies attacked her. They paid other scientists to attack her. It was a long, hard slog, but she never gave in. And she appeared on any kind of program, radio, TV that would ever have her. And what kind of helped this whole situation out is that President John F. Kennedy heard about her, read Silent Spring, read some other work by her, and he started backing her. Unfortunately, as I said, she died too soon. She contracted breast cancer in 1950, survived the surgery. Later on, she then succumbed to it in 1964. So she didn't live long enough to see DDT being banned for any sale or in the United States. I think it was in 1972. But 1970. Earth Day begins in 1972. I might have those two dates wrong because I don't. Yeah, banned in 1972. Earth Day begins in 1970. And she is one of the big ones that really helps all of this to happen. And it's in spite of what everyone around her, what the powers that are fought so hard to silence her, I think, so that we can look back and go, wow, amazing.
Yeah, and it just, I did not know about Rachel Carson before this presentation, but listening to that again, it's just amazing that we are still having these same conversations in 2021 about, the use of harmful materials on crops, um, genetically modified, foods, and that debate on whether or not they're harmful or not. I was reading an article not too long ago, and in the article it said, "Don't eat anything your grandmother wouldn't recognize." So, if a lot of things that we eat today, people 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago would not have even recognized that as food.
Right.
And so it's amazing that um, someone, you know, 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago was doing this kind of research and fighting against this kind of thing. And we're still having that conversation today. so I'm really, you know, just floored that these women were at the forefront of this fight. And they're not talked about enough, to show that there was already this uh, platform, this um, I guess this energy to address these issues, already in play. And sometimes, you know, I tell my kids, you know, things didn't just pop up with you. You're not the first one, you know. So I feel like that, you know, sometimes we think, when did all this happen? You know, we're talking about different, you know, chemicals in the foods that we eat, and how they're carcinogens, and how it causes disease, and you know, and we're fighting against big corporations, where money is concerned, and you feel like that's kind of a late 20th century, early 21st century type thing, but we're finding out that it's not, that the origins go further way back than we imagine when we learn the history and about these women like Rachel Carson, who was on the front lines of the fight.
Completely. You took the words right out of my mouth, Dr. Leonard. I was going to say it's been really interesting doing the research on these women and realizing this is where these conversations have come from.
Mhm. Okay, so for our next woman you should know about, but you probably don't, Betty Friedan, was born in 1921, and she published her best-selling book, The Feminine Mystique, in 1963. And it was groundbreaking for a number of reasons, but the big one of which is that she addressed a growing but silent problem amongst women in the middle of the century, in the 20th century. And that came to be titled, or the moniker that was given to it was the problem with no name. And the problem with no name was that there were women who had degrees, they had educations, they had skill sets, but they were not allowed to use them because society's definition of womanhood at the time was that a woman should be married and should be at home with her children. And so many of these women who had law degrees and were scientists and had all of these, you know, capabilities were really confined to the home, where were not allowed to exhibit any of those skill sets. Or if they did, it was not in a, you know, a manner in which they would get any recognition out in the world or in the community. Just but a few little things about her. She formed the National Organization for Women. She became the first president of the organization. And that organization took on the cause of ending gender discrimination towards women. And so we see her doing that roundabout the late 60s, early 70s. And we know this is a time, and Miss Martin, jump in and help me here, that the women's lib movement is really starting to rage, with some famous figures like Gloria Steinem.
Mhm.
You might not know Bella Asbug, but she was along there with Betty Friedan. Um,
I'm drawing a
oh my
blank.
gosh,
Right.
her name
I'm drawing a blank. I apologize. I should know
Shirley
this.
Shirley Chisholm. I couldn't get that
Yeah.
out. I couldn't get it out.
Oh, you still my heart, Shirley Chisholm.
But Shirley Chisholm, who actually had a very successful run for president.
Mhm.
She
Yes.
didn't win, of course, we know that, but no doubt she made history with her run for president, as I believe was the first recorded or first black woman.
Yes. First black woman.
Actually,
Hmm.
yeah, had such a successful run for president, even though she didn't win. But she also co-founded the National Women's Political Caucus, and she did work with Shirley Chisholm on that,
Hmm.
and Gloria Steinem. And if here's a plug for a really good show, if you hadn't already heard about it, but it's called Miss America, Mrs. America. It's on Hulu, and you get to see all those characters. Those women, Gloria Steinem, Bella Asbug, and Betty Friedan, Shirley Chisholm, amongst others, on the episodes, on the 9 episodes of that show. So it's a really good show. Go out and watch it if you get a chance to. But that particular organization, the National Women's Political Caucus, took on discrimination against pregnant women.
Yes.
Uh, they took on pay equity for women. and also unfair hiring practices against
Right.
women. And so again, it seems like there's a running theme here that we're still talking about those things today. Um,
Absolutely.
and so I do have a little clip that I want to show you, but first let me preface before the clip in saying that this particular clip is from a movie called Mona Lisa Smile. And it's set in the mid 50s at a women's college, Wellesley College. And these girls are taking a class in what we would think of as home economics, but they are learning to host a dinner for their future husbands and their husbands' employers or their bosses if the boss actually happens to come to dinner. And so, if we can roll that clip and we'll watch it and then we'll discuss it afterwards.
Your husband is at a crossroads in his career. He's competing for promotion against two rivals, Smith and Jones. To get the edge, you have wisely decided to invite the boss and his wife to a 7 o'clock dinner. You've carefully planned your meal, set your table, and arranged for a babysitter. Oh, we have babies. Yes, and I have twins. Then surprise, it's 6:15, and your husband's called to say that Smith, Jones, and their wives have been invited at the boss's request. Ever the Wellesley girl, you keep your cool and understand that the boss is probably testing you as much as your husband. What next? Yes. File for divorce? It's very funny. But the thing is, it's not a joke. A few years from now, your sole responsibility will be taking care of your husband and children. You may all be here for an easy A, but the grade that matters the most is the one he gives you, not me. Whatever you do, please say
So, I mean, these are college students. They are studying physics and statistics and philosophy and history and literature, and their sole responsibility in a few years will be taking care of their husbands and children.
With
So,
a degree from Wellesley of all places.
from Wellesley, which Wellesley turns out women. I think Hillary Clinton went to Wellesley.
Yes.
And so this is, really prestigious, what we would think of as Ivy League college. And wow, and they're there, to learn how to take care of their husbands and children. And that's the sole responsibility. That's the sole reason that they're there. So listen to what Friedan writes. She says, by the end of the 1950s, the average marriage age of women in America dropped to 20 and was still dropping into the teens. 14 million girls were engaged by 17. The proportion of women attending college in comparison with men dropped from 47% in 1920 to 35% in 1958. And a century earlier, women had fought for higher education. Now girls went to college to get a husband. And here's, I heard that joke. You go to school to get a BS, not to get a BS, but to get an MRS, right? By the mid 50s, 60% dropped out of college to marry or because they were too afraid of too much education, or they thought education would be a marriage bar. Colleges built dormitories for married students, but the students were almost always the husbands. So later on in that movie, we see one of the pivotal characters who is smart enough and has been accepted to Yale Law School, but she has to put her career on hold to support her husband, who also has been accepted to, I think it's law school or graduate school. And he's expecting her to put her career on hold or not even pursue it at all. And he tells one of her teachers that, he he tells her that, I know she's been accepted to law school and it's great, she'll always have that, she'll always have that. And the teacher says, well, don't you expect her to go? And he says, well, it'd be pretty hard to go to law school at Yale and be home by 5 o'clock to get dinner on the table. So that was the mentality of that time period. And, there's a great culture shift after the war, and where women who had these careers prior to the war, and during the war, now they were expected to go home and be wives and support the home. And so this problem that had no name was one of unfulfillment, dissatisfaction with life, a problem of boredom, a problem of confinement. And as Friedan writes in her novel, women saying, is this all?
Yeah.
Is this all there is? And so nowadays, in comparison, women, far more are going to college. I just read some statistics from the Pew Research Center that said more millennial women are going to college and graduating in higher numbers more than their baby boomer counterparts, or even the silent generation that came before them. And we have to, think this is because of societal shifts or attitudes that, nowadays it's, women, it's really, I think we do still, people have this perception of, why aren't you married if you are a certain age? But it's becoming less and less, and women are holding off marriage and having families sometimes into their 30s and maybe even their 40s, because they're putting their careers first. But that not would not have been, the norm 50 years ago or 60 years ago, that women were expected to get out of high school, or maybe some even dropped out of high school, and marriage was, you know, the goal, to get married. And even if you went to college, you weren't going there to get a degree; you were going to find a husband. And so, now that we do have different, perceptions of marriage, and uh, what age a woman should marry, and those definitions are kind of, waning in terms of, what age a woman should get married. I do have a question, and I'll just put this to the focus group, the panel here. Why are we still struggling, though, with women still trying to assert themselves? They've come out, maybe out from under the marriage societal norm, but we're still trying to assert ourselves in the workplace. We're still trying to get equal pay. We're still trying to, if we do get married and have children, not be treated disrespectfully if we need to do things for our family. And women are having to still make that hard decision whether to be a professional or to be a mom. And we still having that same situation where it's hard to make those two things coexist. And we still, I think, living in a society that makes you choose, that, you can either, be this professional and be out there in the corporate, or even the academic arena where you're trying to climb the professional ladder. You can have that, or you can have a family, but you can't have both. So I don't know why we're still having that conversation.
Well, I think it goes back to Betty Friedan.
Mhm,
You know, the world was ruled by men.
mhm,
After that World War II, they tried to shove everybody back in their little cubby holes as before. And in the beginning, women really wanted to go. They put off everything for this war, and they wanted to have a husband and a home and children. And then it's like, wait, maybe we didn't want all that after all. And so we did make strides, but again, we're still saying, where's the equity? Where's the pay? Where's the, right to do this and that and the other? And there's another layer to this now also, is that since the pandemic began, more and more women have left the workforce to stay home because the children are home, and they end up almost invariably, not always, we have to say, but more often than not, being the ones who give that position up to be with the children.
mhm.
And again, we're kind of almost keep reiterating this old standard. You have to take care of the family. You have to take care of the home. It's like a never ending story, I think, or it keeps just being, like a big wheel we can't get off of, or destroy, maybe even. I don't know that we should destroy it, but let's reshape it.
Uh, so it's, we are still not giving women the opportunity to choose. So
Right.
if you want to, be more of a have more tradition where you are a woman and you stay at home and you keep the house and you're married and all of that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that,
No,
personally,
no.
if that's what you decide. But just not having the option is what is the issue. That you have to do one or the other. You can either have a family or you can have a career, but you can't have both. Something's going to suffer. And I personally think that, um, our environment, our society makes it hard for women to have both. Take, for example, and we now are starting to see a lot of corporate organizations, businesses start to cater a little bit more to women who are mothers, in terms of they have quiet rooms where women can pump breast milk when they're away from their babies. Our country does not do a good job with maternity leave. The average standard maternity leave is still 6 weeks in most places, and that is not enough time to even heal in most cases after you've had a baby. And so we see women who are having to go back to work because this is unpaid leave as well. So they can't afford to be off much longer than 6 weeks to have the baby because they need to have a paycheck. And so, and when we compare other countries where maternity leave is a lot longer, and dare I even say it's family leave, the father can get off work too for that amount of time. We find ourselves coming up short in this country, and it looks like it's a direct hit at the family, because now you got to choose. If I have a baby, I've got all these things to consider: the cost, the time off from work without a paycheck. Who's going to keep the child if I have to go back to work? So there's daycare to consider, and the cost of that. And so it really um, goes against the encouragement for women to want to get married and have children, because the incentive is just not there. It's too hard.
Very hard.
um, I just think that we're still, having this lopsided approach to what it means to be a woman. And part of being a woman, or one aspect of being a woman, can be that a woman chooses to have a child. And it shouldn't just be that, if she chooses to have a child, she's got to sacrifice. She's got to give up, her chances at a career. She's got to, worry about money, and she's got, so I think as we get wiser in our country about certain things, and we could become more woke to the fact that there are gender inequalities and issues, we're still kind of not addressing the fundamental things that um, really women care about, and really hits to the bottom line of um, the decisions that women have to make on a daily basis. I know we were talking about the other day the inequalities in sports and all of the stuff that's going on in the news now with the NCAA, and earlier last year when basketball came back, we got to see a little bit of the disparities between the WNBA bubble versus the NBA bubble. And it's eye opening, because we like to think of our athletes who excel and exceed the norm or the standards. They should be respected, they should be applauded, they should be rewarded, and that maybe is happening for the men but not so much for the women. Or even in the case of soccer, where it's not happening for women, and they're the ones that are winning the games.
And the cups.
They're winning the cups.
Well,
Yeah.
what matters.
Yeah, but they're not getting the same pay as the men. And so as much as we take these strides forward, we still have a ways to go. We still have a ways to go.
I think it's kind of, I mentioned our last conversation that, you know, women, although, and everybody wants to bring up revenue and in this conversation, it shouldn't matter how much revenue either sport makes. Each, especially with the NCAA tournament, each athlete works their butt off to get to that tournament. And if you make that list of 64 teams, regardless of what school you go to, whether it's UConn or whether it's, MTSU, or I think my record last time we talked was Jackson State. Jackson State University made the tournament this year, and they had been on an upward slope in the last 2 or 3 years, and their hard work had paid off, and they made the tournament. And I'm sure that the excitement was real, and it was just huge. But then they go to the tournament and like, oh, this is what it's like. It's like this is not as big of an ordeal as I thought it was going to be. And so I think that everybody's experience should be the same, regardless of how much revenue or TV deals or whatever. I think that we really need to address that. And we talked about how the NCAA kind of put a Band-Aid over the women's basketball tournament by trying to fix the situation with bringing in the extra weight room equipment and all of that. And the coach at Georgia Tech made a great point. You thought of us after the fact. So when is that going to change? And is it my mind? I'm sitting here thinking, is it an ego thing for the men? They don't want to be outdone by a woman. Is that what it is?
Perhaps.
It's kind of like what's the deal? Like we kind of need the feedback from the men. Like, why is this happening? What is your issue with the women or a woman in the same position as you? Like, is it an intimidation factor? Like, what is it? Like, not being rude or hateful about it, but just really innocently asking why. Why are we still going through this? Like Dr. Leonard, you mentioned, why are we still having this same conversation about Title IX issues in sports?
I think you have to start at the top.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you have to start at the top and look to see who's in charge. Who are those folks? And generally, I mean, things have been changing. They have become younger and younger, usually men in charge. But for a long time, it was older men who weren't going to change their minds, who just, okay, that's the new law of the land. Sure, go there, kind of patting you on the hand or the head and saying, okay, yeah, you can be here too. But not really giving it serious. It was like giving lip service instead of giving it serious,
Right.
Uh-huh.
I think we need more professional men or men in professional sports to come out and speak against the inequities. I think Stephen Curry, he tweeted something about the inequities of the NCAA, and that's good, but it's going to take more than tweets. I'm not, begrudging his tweet, and I think that's fine. That's great. Twitter is a great platform to get what you want said, but it's going to take action on the part of, like you said, men who are in control, men who are at the top, and those women who are also at the top who have the ability to close the gap and even out the playing field for real. So until that happens, we'll still be having this conversation, unfortunately. But it's going to take the people in power. I think you're right, Ms. Martin. It's going to take the people in power to be ashamed. Be ashamed and recognize that, especially when we're talking about non-professional sports where students are concerned, all these athletes are students.
Exactly.
They are all students, and we certainly definitely strive in our colleges. I hope we do not to treat, one group of students better than the other. That we want to try to have equity across the board. And then we have this NCAA situation where it's just glaring and blatant, and it sends a message to these women athletes that you don't matter.
Yeah. Um, especially at the NCAA level, because we know each of these athletes, at least since high school, has been working nonstop to be where they end up. And then to say, oh, come on, yay, the school gets excited, these athletes are so thrilled. And then to get there, it's a slap in the face, not only to the schools themselves, but especially to these athletes. Okay, yay, you made it. Here, enjoy.
Yeah, or don't be too vocal.
Right.
Here's your little weight room. I thought it was funny, and she was definitely the young lady who was showing the weight room, and she showed just the one little triangle of weights, and she was she was good natured about it. But at the end of the day, it's like Nobody wants to be put on Front Street like that. But at the end of the day, our organizations, large organizations like the NCAA that bring in millions of dollars, we know they can do better. And they know they can do better. It's
Absolutely.
not a matter of somebody, outing them. It's a matter of do right from the beginning. Do what's right from the start. And don't and they could have done better. The weight room they gave them still didn't measure up to the the one that the men have. So they still didn't really correct the wrong in my book.
Being a female athlete, I totally get it. Growing up, and I was with I'm in some different groups on Facebook and stuff, and I know that it took a lot of courage for that young lady to show what she showed and put NCAA out there. But I've seen posts where dads are furious, and that's what it's going to take, somebody's dad being in that position and saying, I want better for my daughter. If my daughter were in this situation, I would want her to have everything that we could possibly give them and give them the best experience as possible. So that's kind of what I've been seeing. And, the NCAA is supposed to be nonprofit. So I'm just going to leave that out there. So go move on.
And then we get to a couple of entertainers here. So this is May Wong, and I had heard of her, and I think I've even seen her in a few films. She's very early in film history. She is a Chinese American, and I think it's very appropriate that we bring her in here, but also just to celebrate, her story. Again, she's in the same time age range as some of these others, a few of these others we've mentioned. She was born in 1905, left us in 1961. She's the very first Chinese American film star in the silent era. She's in silent film. She's in TV later on. She's on the stage. She left the United States because she couldn't get any starring roles here in the United States because she wasn't white. And so she went to Europe and had a huge career there, starring in all kinds of films and on the stage, and eventually came back. But I did want to mention one film. In 1922, there was a film called The Toll of the Sea, which can be seen on YouTube. That is one of the very first Technicolor films. And most color film doesn't show up till think Gone with the Wind in 1939. I mean, that's where we normally start to think of color film. It's beautiful, but it's the racism, because this is a prime period where we were so anti-Chinese anything. The Chinese Exclusion Act had taken effect in 1882. By 1905 or 1905, I think it was, we added more legislation to stop all that was only supposed to last for about 10 years. We just kept adding on. And so she doesn't even live to the point where Chinese Americans get their full citizenship back, which was with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so it's pretty amazing. She started her own production company. It folded because one of her, I think the person who was doing her books ended up kind of in some trouble. And then she was the first Asian American to have a TV show. The name was The Gallery of Madame Liu Song. And she's just an amazing woman who fought, to get where she was. And she knew what she wanted. She defied her family to do what she wanted.
I think it's so unfortunate that so many people have been overlooked and their talents have been overlooked because they're a certain ethnic group. They're a certain, I'm black or I'm white and that's why I'm getting overlooked. I think that's so unfortunate, because think of all of the talent that we've missed as we look back on history, and we have to really dive deep and you see, oh my gosh, how talented was this person? I think that's just really unfortunate. And I think that's probably one of the big motives for me doing this, is because for this month, because there's so many talented women out there that, or just get overlooked just because they're a woman a lot of the time. So I think it's really important that we dig deep and find those really talented ladies out there and give them some spotlight.
Absolutely. And with Anime Wong, we talk a lot about how African Americans were discriminated against in film, and still are, but Asian Americans as well. It's, not a widely known, talked about situation that Asian Americans were also discriminated against. And I heard Miss Martin mention that it was, Anime Wong couldn't get a part, or it was hard for her to get acting job, and so she went to Europe. And interestingly enough, she actually auditioned for a movie that was about Asian Americans. It was called The
Yes.
Good Earth, and it featured, the setting was China, and she did not get the part because the actors who played the Chinese characters were white. And we've heard of such a thing called blackface, where we have people putting on makeup
Mhm.
to make caricatures of African Americans, but there was also a thing called yellowface,
Yes.
where you have white characters who are getting uh, dressed up in makeup to appear Asian. And so she was, a victim of that anti-miscegenation laws that were going on at the time, where you know you couldn't be seen on television with a white actor and an Asian wife, or a white person and an Asian person being, acting in a relationship, even if they, weren't really in a relationship. They couldn't even be portrayed that way. And so we nowadays we don't see very many Asian Americans reflected in commercials, even, or movies. You may see one or two, but not, a widely visible Asian, acting um, pool of people. And so, Crazy Rich Asians came out not too long ago. It's one of my most favorite movies ever. And I don't know, by now everybody knows I like movies because all my stuff had movie clips in them. But I mean, you think about that, how the cast of Crazy Rich Asians was, the total cast was Asian, with the exception of a few extras in the background. And how often do you see that? We don't see that. You actually have to watch Asian television, or Asian film, the film corporation or whatever organization, to see that. And so it's interesting that, outside of the United States, there's Bollywood, and Bollywood is, second to Hollywood, and it is a huge organization of film making in India. And even though we're talking about Asian Americans, there's also Nollywood, which is a
Yeah.
huge organization of filmmaking in Nigeria. And so there are things that we just, we kind of tend to be in our own little American bubble sometimes, and we don't really know what's going on out in the world. And so it's good to see that at a time when people were really discriminated against all people of color, that Anime Wong stands as this representative of someone who pushed past the odds, and she actually has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I don't know where it is. And I wish that the last time I was in California out there, I should have taken it. I wish I had known I could see into the future, because I could have taken a picture of that and had it for this presentation, but I don't. But she's out there on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So if you're out in LA on Hollywood Boulevard and you find out where her star is, go take a look at it, and pay homage to Anime Wong for being one of the first of her kind.
Last but not least,
Last but not least, and so we have Gertrude Berg. She was the daughter of Jewish immigrants, and she got into radio, and she got into radio because her husband lost his job, and this was in the 30s. And so she went and she proposed this radio show. You're supposed to type out your script and hand it in, and she wrote everything her entire life longhand, and they couldn't read it, so she did the parts and everything. She got the show. It was a 15-minute show, and it was called The Rise of the Goldbergs. And she wrote for that one program. I think it eventually got longer, 20 minutes or so. She wrote more than 5,000 scripts just for it. And as time is marching on, she gets to the what year was it? 1949 TV begins. And so they're scrambling, everyone, all these TV stations, RC, NBC, CBS, ABC are scrambling to try to find programming. And she takes her idea straight to CBS. A couple of them had already said no. And she says, look, I want to take the Goldbergs into television. They said, well, we don't have anything like it. She said, I'll do it. I'll do everything. And they literally, when she did radio, she got $75 a week. In less than 2 years, she was getting $2,000 a week. This is how good this woman was. She makes the move to TV. She invents the sitcom. It was not invented by a man. And we still use the same format over and over and over. She invents it. She writes all the scripts. She produces it. She stars in it. And then she does all the commercials. She incorporates the commercials into her program, into the Goldbergs. And it runs for quite a while. Now, she kind of, there's even a part where they all move. They've been in New York. They move to Connecticut. They become part of the suburbs, the whole kind of thing going on there. But her TV program ran into some bumps along the way, unfortunately. The man who played her husband got kind of caught up in the Red Scare of the 50s. And so he was blackballed, and everyone kind of said, well, you knew him by by association. And so she lost her program there after about 5 years. And then she went on to another lesser known TV station for a few more years. But there is video on YouTube. You can watch episodes of it. And what she did here was, it's just this family, this immigrant family trying to make ends meet, trying to live the American dream, whatever that means. And what she does is she very, very, very skillfully weaves in there amongst all this storyline, what the life of modern Jews is like. And so she's spreading her culture to be known to all across the United States. They had no idea who Jews were. We traditionally, we don't like them, And so she actually spreads that culture through this thing. It's a really cool story.
I had not heard of Gertrude Berg before now. And so I'm learning about her too. And it just makes me think of how, if it hadn't have been a Gertrude Berg, there wouldn't have been a Lucille Ball.
Exactly, because what happened was, so the first what's the TV awards? Oh my Lord, I just went blank.
The Emmys.
The Emmys. She gets the first Emmy for Best Actress over Betty White. Okay, so they're contemporaries, and then they were going to move her show to be back to back with I Love Lucy, because it started after hers. They were going to back it, so it was going to be an hour of women power there. And then unfortunately they canceled the show because of the man who played her husband, and it didn't happen. But she's the one that creates all this so that I Love Lucy could come along and be, forever running, and everybody loves it. Yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna stop the screen share so we can kind of continue dialogue. We can see each other now. So I just want to highlight, like, as I'm sitting here listening to you ladies speak, just how incredibly brave these women were, and especially May Wong, to have basically left her family to go pursue her dreams. And it's just, it's kind of, everything sinks in at once. These women were incredibly brave, and they were the trailblazers that started the conversations that we still have and that are very important to our environment, our social environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a running theme is that, these women dared to be authentically genuine. They dared to be themselves, even when, society was against it, even when there were obstacles. that obviously could have stopped them from proceeding and doing what they did, but yet they persisted. And is their persistence, that is why, even though we're still struggling and having some of the same conversations, their persistence is why we have a lot of freedoms we have now.
Absolutely.
And I think about too, had they not started these conversations, whereas the three of us who are women, where would we be today if these conversations hadn't been started?
Mm-hmm.
So, do you guys have any more comments before we end our episode of Women You Should Know?
I just want to say this was fun.
Yeah.
And, even though it's Women's History Month, it would be really cool to do something like this. I don't know, uh, maybe not every month, if because that could be kind of busy, but once, a quarter, like once
Yeah.
every 4 months, or once a semester or twice a semester or whatever. It would be cool to do this, and to keep the conversation going, because I really do think it's needed. Um, because that there's so many, we couldn't cover everybody today because there's just so many, but then that just means that we got to do more.
Absolutely.
We should have, we got stuff, content that we can put in other future women's history or women history conversations, and the like.
Absolutely. I'd love to do that.
Sure. Well, I appreciate you ladies, and I appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to kind of continuing this conversation.
I'm
And
sorry.
we're gonna
As the dogs send us off.
well, you ladies have a great afternoon.
Women,
And
those dogs, women, are they girl dogs?
Yeah, 3 of them out of the 4. Yes.
There you go. Rock on, rock on.
all right, thank you, ladies.
Thanks.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.